Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry, and with me, as always, is...
You have a really nice place here, Paul. How much did you pay for it? Well, actually, that's none of your business, Christy. But I can assure you, it certainly wasn't cheap. Eddie, of Edward is Truth.
So now you're doing multiple voices?
I've done it before.
Okay, just checking. And today, we're closing out the year. This is the last podcast of 2022.
Oh my God.
We're doing American Psycho.
Psycho.
Yeah.
No, it's just not even words.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't do words. I don't.
I mean, it's kind of appropriate, though, because it was made in 2000, or released in 2000.
1999, yeah.
I have 2000
No,
on
it's
IMDb.
made in 1999.
Made in 1999, released in 2000. So, it's kind of also a New Year, maybe, movie.
Well, it depends. Like, it's like the Seinfeld argument. Like, how long after New Year's do you, like, stop acknowledging the New Year?
Right. Until you stop saying Happy New Year. For me, after New Year's Day, if people are saying it on the second, third, fourth, fifth, I'm like, calm down. Just calm down, Mary, and back it up.
Yeah. Well, because we were talking, because when we were picking the December selections, because we talked about this of just like,
yes,
are we doing Christmas movies, or because we did Silent Night, Deadly Night last week, and we're just like, we're gonna do all Christmas movies, and then just like, no, that's a bit much, like that, like we need to calm down there, and American Psycho came up because we're trying to balance like the decades of horror, because I know like we didn't have a lot of 70s movies that we'd covered, so we did Suspiria, but they're like, let's get some 2000s in there, and I threw this one out as a suggestion, and you pounced on it like
totally.
Yeah.
Like what? What did I pounce on it like?
I don't know. We'll let the listeners fill in the blanks. But
like Patrick Bateman on an unsuspecting sex worker? I don't know. I am like Patrick Bateman. We've established. No, I'm not.
No, I'm not.
No, I like standing out too much.
The center of attention.
Yeah, I don't want to fit in. Well, sometimes, but no.
Yeah. Do you want to? Do you have a synopsis you want to do before we start talking? Because I know
I have a premise.
Yeah, because normally like we start talking and then it's like 20 minutes later and like, oh, we should probably do that. So let's do it now because we get carried away.
I revised the premise that is offered on IMDb just to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
Wealthy 1980s New York investment banking executive. Oh, it sounds like I said baking. I'm going to start over. Wealthy 1980s New York investment banking executive Patrick Bateman hides his alternate sociopathic ego from his coworkers and so-called friends as he delves deeper into the violent, hedonistic fantasies of an American Psycho. That's all.
Chills. That was really good. You sounded just like him.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, really nice. I guess because he's an English actor. Christian Bale. Yeah, because he like went full on into character during the movie that he just did the American accent the whole time. That it wasn't until after they wrapped and like at the premiere or something that he came up and just was talking in his normal voice, and people were just like, "Is he doing a bit? Like, what's with the Britishness?" Until they found out, like, no, he's actually.
That's not uncommon if you're trying to really kind of like refine an accent, though. They say that when you're comfortable expressing your own thoughts and your own feelings in the accent, then you've mastered it. So I've seen, other actors like Hugh Laurie when he was shooting House, when I met him on set. Not met him, but I interacted with him on set. He held the door open for me, and I was just kind of like, oh my God, House is hold a door open for me. He's being polite. He must really like me. I'm just such an idiot. But he...
So you were an extra on House?
And he was just... I was in the background on House, yeah.
Okay.
For a few times.
But Hugh Laurie opened the door for you, or the character of House opened the door for you?
No, not on the show. Like, we were literally exiting the soundstage.
Okay.
And he was ahead of me, and I guess he sensed that I was behind him, so he held the door for me. And he was like, "There you go." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And he was like, "You're welcome." And not like, "You're welcome." I've heard him speak with an English accent, so I was just like, "Oh my God!" It was like House.
No, I was just my confusion was that I've seen House before, and
yeah,
Dr. House is like not the type that would hold the door for anyone. So I just like
exactly
the novelty of the fact that you were
especially a background actor, like,
and he's just like, I'm gonna hold the door for this guy.
He wouldn't. No, House wouldn't hold. Dr. House wouldn't hold the door open for like a royal or a dignitary or an ambassador. So certainly not for somebody who's just doing background.
Well, okay, as a more contemporary example of what you're saying though, just like the accent, because I saw like a little. It might have been like a TikTok or something of Tom Holland. And he was just talking about like how he's just gotten so used to this Peter Parker accent that I think he was doing a commercial or something, and he was just talking in the Peter Parker voice, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "This is my voice," and he's like, "Oh wait." So
he also turned it on Tom Holland for a kid. I saw there was some kind of I don't know if it was a Zoom chat or whatever that he was doing with a kid who wanted to meet Spider-Man. Yeah. And he was like, "Oh, hello there." And the kid didn't seem to react at all because just seeing a face on the phone, you can't really tell. But then he immediately went to, "Hey, so how are you doing?" With his little Peter Parker kind of, whatever. Because he's got that little kind of squeak to his voice too, And he started doing that, and immediately the kid just lost his shit. And so anyway, if Christian Bale started speaking in an American accent to me, first of all, it would depend on which one, because he's done quite a few now. He's done this one. He's done Bruce Wayne. He's done, what's the name of his character in Newsies? Jack. Is it Jack?
No idea.
I feel like it's Jack. I think that was the first movie I ever saw Christian Bale in. So by the time I got to this one, I think I'd seen him in maybe about 6 movies.
I think I'd seen what's the one that he did when he was a kid? Something like Emperor of the Sun or something.
Oh, something like that. Yeah. I haven't seen that one.
That's the one still. We watched that in school, I think. Weird.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that was the one, because that was right before, or it was either, maybe it wasn't the first thing. Maybe this was the first thing I saw. But I just remember being like, oh, that's like Patrick Bateman or the guy who's going to play Patrick Bateman. Because when this movie came out, okay, let's get into it, as you say. Yes. Well, this came, because this was April 2000. So this was like right after Scream 3, almost.
Okay.
So no, just to give a timeline.
All right.
For when this came out, but
it's always in relation to the Scream franchise.
Absolutely.
That's how we measure time.
Do you know where you are? But I just remember the buzz around the movie. Like, I don't even think like I'd seen any trailers or anything, but it was just like the buzz, because it wasn't just like buzz from like entertainment sources and stuff. It was like teachers and parents and like everyone talking about it, because this was like a controversial, like the book was controversial. So it's just like when it was like found out that there's a movie, it's being made, it's been made, it's releasing, there was so much talk about it. And that kind of was the like, when you're a kid and the grown-ups like forbid you from doing something. Even if you have no interest in something, or that, say they make dinner and then there's like a dish and you don't know what it is, and they're just like, nah, you wouldn't like that, and you're just like, fuck that, I'll have it and I'll like it, and so kind of like the whole thing about American Psycho, and just like hearing that like conversation come up at the dinner table, for instance, and just being like, what's American Psycho, and just being like, oh, it's just like a really controversial book they're making into a movie, and it's, parents groups and all this, like nobody's happy about it at all. And I'm just like, oh, I'm going to see that. And they're like, no, you're not. like, try and stop me.
Wow.
So this, I mean, even the production of this movie, like there were so many brands that pulled out. There was like locations that they were going to shoot at, like office buildings. They're just like, no, we don't like the subject matter. That, you know, it forced them to like build office sets because they, you know, they had all this stuff lined up. You know, almost like Scream. Sorry to bring it back to that franchise you hate, of like the first movie where
Jesus Christ.
no, the first movie when they wanted to shoot at the school and they wouldn't let them, so they had to use the community center to double for the school venue. And then they put in the end credits like an absolutely no thanks whatsoever to the school board, yada yada yada. So it's, you know, similar, like things happen, like that was happening tenfold with the American Psycho production. Rolex, like there was a line where he's just like, don't touch the Rolex, and they're just like, no, you can't use Rolex, and they're just like, don't touch the watch. Whitney Houston refused to have her music in the movie, so what they did, because he has that whole monologue where he's talking about Whitney Houston's debut self-titled album, great album by the way, but he's listening to The Greatest Love of All, but it's just like this instrumental version that actually is not her in any way. So that was like how director Mary Harron was able to sneak Whitney Houston into the movie, because there was like this whole scene just based on talking about Whitney Houston. So just, like a lot of people wanted nothing to do with this, even like actors who were cast, because like initially they were telling Christian Bale, like, this is a career killer, like you don't take this role. I think before, like, Leonardo DiCaprio was originally approached to play the role, and I don't even think he wanted to do it, because he is just like, yeah, I'll do it for 20 million or something, and they're like, yeah,
right,
no
something
way, no
exorbitant. He was approached for everything around this time, though. He was approached for 2 years earlier for the Gus Van Sant Psycho to play Norman Bates. So I mean, he was kind of like patient zero, you know.
Well, I think he ended up doing The Beach instead of this,
which I still have not seen.
I don't even remember it. But just in terms of like for me, just like hearing that, like, this is a movie that the grown-ups are afraid of. It's like, this is like, I have to see this now. And like, this is going into my first experience of seeing this movie, because I had no idea what I was in for. It was all just kind of like the salacious, like, you know, I was forbade from watching this. I was just like, I have to see it. And I know that, like, in the States, like, there were cuts made, like in the original theatrical version, to get it from an NC-17 down to an R. But in Canada, the rating system is different. So it was like restricted here is like the highest rate. Like, that's the equivalent of NC-17 or NC-18. Because you have to be 18 to see it. You can't even go with a parent if you're under 18. So it's just like, they're like, you know, even if it was the rating below that, they're like, we're not taking you. So my friend and I were like, you know, when that was the classification that came out, I'm like, fuck, it's going to be really difficult to see this. So we're like, we're going to sneak into it. We're going to find a way. So we did. It wasn't that hard either. Like, we're just, you know, just wait till they're not looking. Like, buy a ticket for something else and then just like walk into the theater. And
like you do. Yeah.
It was empty. Like, there was very few people in there. So I think like the word of mouth, because people had already like written the movie off, was just like, it's going to be terrible. No one wants to see it. So there's just a few people. And I remember that I remember being underwhelmed, because I was just like, that's it. Like, that's what I wasn't allowed to see. Like, I think the biggest things were, it wasn't so much the violence, which I think was what was disconcerting about the book, because the book is like way more graphic than anything in the movie. Yes. But it's like for the like MPAA and all that, it was the sex scenes and stuff like that. And I just recall how every time there was a sex scene, it was like brightly lit, like illuminated white, that like cast this like huge brightness onto like the theater of just like everyone sitting there. And I remember that an usher came in like as we're sitting there during that scene, and I'm just like, fuck, they're gonna see us because it's like we're so like illuminated right now. So I just remember like sinking down into my seat and like trying to hide myself from, you know, because I was like, what, 2000 would have been, I think 14 at the time of that. But yeah, that was my experience, and I just remember leaving the theater and being like, so what, you know?
Wow. I have no recollection of anything adjacent to that in terms of like what was at least in my periphery at the time, but I was still navigating through a depression, so maybe that had something to do with it. Also, I don't know. I was also an adult. I was around 20. So, and I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it a little bit later, so I think I was like 21. So I was old enough to get wherever I wanted, and I was really kind of craving like the movies that, regardless of what other people were saying, that just kind of like seemed to be on the outskirts. I mean, even thinking about in terms of what preceded this movie, while I was watching it, this particular screening, to take notes and everything, I kept getting notes of a lot of things, but one thing in particular was Talented Mr. Ripley, which had been released the year before. Not seen. Because... Oh, I think it's worth your time.
I've seen parts. If you've never seen parts,
but, if you've never seen it before, definitely there's enough there.
I've seen the boat scene. If that, unless there's more than one, but you know, the boat.
No, there's one, but I mean, there's a big boat, but they're like, you mean the actual?
There's a little boat. I think it was closer to the
little
end of the
boat
movie,
with the two men on it. Yeah, that one.
It doesn't sound as dirty as that description.
No, it isn't. Anthony Minghella just depicts violence and sociopathy in a very different light, in a beautiful kind of like almost amber. Sunset, you know, magic hour light, but it's a very different movie, but just in the sense of like how much time we spend with our protagonist, or you know, anti-protagonist, committing these, you know, incredibly violent and lethal acts. And I think we're made to feel a little bit more sympathy or a little bit more insight to Tom Ripley than we are to Patrick Bateman, certainly. But yeah, just things like that, like, you know, sharing perspectives with people who you otherwise would probably, you know, cross the street to avoid if you knew the threat that was like coming towards you. People who you know, the only way you'd want to like gain any kind of insight into that mind is probably through a book or a movie, not through like a direct exchange, because then you're, you know, behind the enemy lines basically. But and even just I'm trying to think, because I was looking at, like, I had forgotten how many people are in this movie, like Justin Theroux, Josh Lucas, Chloe Sevigny, Jared Leto. I completely forgot was in this movie.
I forgot that Reese Witherspoon was in this movie. I was just like,
oh, I never forget that.
What is Reese doing in this movie? That was the biggest like shocker to me.
Oh no, I never forget that, because this was, I always think, yeah,
and everyone, it's just like they're just bit parts, like it's just, you know, because basically 100% of the movie is just Christian Bale.
Mm-hmm. He's in every scene basically. Yeah.
I think I was reading the only one that he's not in is when Jean, the secretary, like finds the journal or the calendar.
Right. That's it's intercut with what's going on with him. She doesn't even get her own isolated scene from beginning to end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hadn't read the book. I still have not read this book. I read the only Bret East Ellis book that I've read was Rules of Attraction, which actually, spoilers for the book of Rules of Attraction, has a cameo, if you will, of Patrick Bateman, because it takes place around the same time as the events of American Psycho, and his little brother, I believe his name was Sean, is one of the protagonists of Rules of Attraction, and they actually have, I believe, a lunch or a coffee together, and you actually see the interaction from Patrick's perspective too.
But he's not in the movie.
He's not in the movie at all.
Is his brother in the movie?
No, his brother Sean is a main player. That's in Rules of Attraction. James Van Der Beek plays the character who would be Patrick Bateman's brother, except they updated it to have it all take place at the time the movie was made, which was circa 2000, 2005, something like that. And all the references are gone, all of the 80s-ness is gone, and even a lot of the raunchier, more kind of like enjoyable sexual openness of it. Like, I mean, just like a lot of fluidity among the sexual practices of these people are taken out, and it's just kind of like, no, they're straight, they're gay, and I'm just kind of like, oh, fuck you. Anyway, but but in terms of just like this dark night of the soul, like wandering around, feeling kind of like a ghost in your own existence, is definitely present in Rules of Attraction with a sarcastic edge, and I feel like that's the way the book has always been described to me, like kind of like a wry sense of humor, or a satire on sociological trends and patterns that Bret East Ellis observed about the 80s and about classism in America and stuff like that, which I think is present in the book. But the thing is, I remember at the time of its release, the thing that I heard most about this movie, particularly after I'd seen it and when I would talk to people about it, they would criticize it for not being enough like the book, because they would either argue it's too much like a horror movie or argue it's too earnest and gives too much humanity to all of the characters. And I don't know, I especially after watching it this most recent time, I felt like that was actually a real achievement on the part of Mary Harron and on Guinevere Turner, her co-screenwriter who plays Elizabeth. I just felt like, well, the sense of humor is there. There's, without a doubt, there's laughs to be had in this movie, and I don't find the endowing of certain moments or certain characters with a little extra dimension or a little accessibility for the audience, a little humanity, if you will. I actually kind of find that even more enticing, because it makes it feel like it's not completely disengaged from reality. It feels like it's trying to incorporate, like life, it's comprised of many different parts and many different genres at any given time.
When it does kind of like dip into more of like the horror aspects. There's only a few scenes that are really like horror-esque. Yeah. Like the chase scene with the chainsaw, because I mean like that. Right. You do feel for the Kirsty or whatever.
Christy.
Yeah, which is not her name, but
in quotes. Right.
Yeah, I was just like, you're just like, yeah, like you want to see her get away. Which I mean, just like I didn't care. Then they're just like, so what? Just have it play out and finish. But I don't know. I think this was the first time I had watched it since I initially saw it in the theater. Well, I owned it on DVD, but I have a lot of movies on physical media, so I don't know if I might have watched it again on DVD. So maybe this was the third time I'd seen it, but it's not one that I've revisited over and over again. Like, it's not that kind of movie for me, but I still like thoroughly enjoy it. And I think at this stage in my life, I appreciate it a lot more, because when I watched it then, it was more so just like out of spite, like it's just like, I'm gonna see this movie because you don't want me to, and didn't really like retain anything, and I probably like left it just being underwhelmed, because it's just like, I don't say what's so bad about that,
Actually, you're reminding me of, I think there were also probably movies that were causing more of an uproar in the circles I was traveling in at the time, because I was already familiar with Chloe Sevigny from Boys Don't Cry, which I think got released the year before or 2 years before. But even before that, I saw her in Larry Clark's film Kids, which was a hands down, like, this is controversial. This is, this is kiddie porn. This is for, we need to stop this and keep it out of the hands of everything. But I had a roommate who had introduced me to the movie in college at NYU when I was 18. And I remember, I don't know, something about also, it was a different time, but I mean, also, there was something about the rebelliousness of my own, from 18 to like 21, that was a very rebellious time for me in terms of like, kind of like giving things the benefit of the doubt and looking for things that shared a perspective, an undesirable perspective, rather than like kind of like a model of how you should live your lives and what your values should be. I was looking for things that were pushing the boundaries, and this certainly did it. But it didn't even push the boundaries compared to some of the other movies I was watching. It was
almost like there's even like a rebellion of Hollywood, of just like a faction of it, that it was just like, we're going to make movies like that. Because I remember like at that time there were so many controversial movies like that, like Boys Don't Cry and Kids, which I'd never seen either of those, but I just remember like a slew of them that came out like late 90s, early 2000s. And at some point, like something gave because movies like this are, I mean, not exactly like this, but just like controversial movies are so commonplace now that nobody bats an eye. It's just kind of like, okay, like, you know, like what is the new standard for what is controversial? Because like movies are being made today that are way worse than American Psycho. Like this is pretty tame by comparison. So we're gonna eventually we'll get to a point where something is going to be so heinous that it's gonna like go back to it's cyclical, you know, like, you know, parents are gonna be like that. No, like we can't have our kids watching like that. But that's like, you know, millennials and Gen X who are now gonna be kind of like, no, that's too much for us, you know, like because this is like boomers who are kind of like didn't like American Psycho. So it'll be interesting to see like when it starts up again, like what the next crazy thing will be.
Yeah, sadly, I think there's a lot of really, really good content being churned out right now. I think I've said it on the pod before. I feel like we live in the age of content right now because there are so many different platforms with so many different people developing so many different projects. The problem is it's harder to find things if you're not like kind of like in the know or in the loop with a bevy of, you know, like a community online. Luckily, most of us are. Yeah. A lot of things that I go see are because not just because I don't see trailers anymore. So it's usually word of mouth or seeing people's posts and their stories and stuff like that. This was kind of like, I mean, we didn't have social media in 2000 and 2001. So I just had my other friends who enjoyed movies. Like, I think I saw a trailer maybe before another movie I had gone to see. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was, you know, released and everything. But I had a lot of people, you know, telling me when they found out that I hadn't seen it, oh, you have to see it. I'm like, all right, cool. You know, people whose opinions I respect. And then I remember, having a kind of, I laughed a lot. I was intrigued. At the time, I remember I was shocked and proud in a weird way that this was the product of two female filmmakers, you know, or at least two female screenwriters and one female director. But because that's another thing that I appreciated, though, was because it wasn't what people were afraid of seems to be what I guess most people tend to, or at least at the time, the decade prior, what people were protesting in horror was a lot of gratuitous violence and predominantly violence against women. And here, this movie that supposedly is going to showcase a lot of violence against women really doesn't. It's left to your own imagination to connect the dots. There's a lot of before the kill and a lot of, or not even before the kill, before the violence and then after the violence. Like I think about his session, as it were, with Christy and with, he names the other one Sabrina, and how we get the explicit, and it's not even that explicit, it's all simulated, but we get the nudity and the simulated sex. And then we get him looking at, you know, the tools and whatnot and them reflecting back on his face and saying, we're not done. And then we cut directly to the aftermath, which is no more palatable. I mean, because you see the effect. Sabrina seems incredibly shaken by what's going on, but I'm always fascinated by Christy. There's something about that character and her, I don't know, her observation. She has an observational quality about him, almost a fascination. Mm-hmm. Sometimes she's bored. Sometimes she feels like she's regretted the decision that she's made. Yeah. But other times she's just kind of like looking at him and listening to him go on, particularly in his monologues, as if she's like trying to figure him out or just trying to figure out
where's this going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why, because it's sort of I listened to there's a few commentaries on the disc that I have.
Yes.
So I listened to the newest one, the most recent one, that it was just Mary Harron on her own, and she was talking about this character, and I guess what they had decided for her is that she was a drug addict, and that's why she ended up going back and, you know, taking the bait from Bateman. It's like she needed the money, so it's just like it was easy. But like the whole time she's sees him, like she's just like, okay, like this is strange. And she's almost like there's several scenes, like, you know, right before he murders the other one, like during the second date.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Because she's already kind of like getting up and like trying to sneak out.
Yes.
And then that's when it happens, and then he sees her. But yeah, because they're sort of like in the first interaction when they leave, like the other one, Sabrina, like she's really shaken up. And Christy just kind of like, we don't even see her face. She just walks by the frame, snatches the money out of his hand, and just like, fuck you. Like, I'm out of here. Don't bother me anymore.
And there's something about that, the fact that we can't even see her face. Like, we get the reveal of Sabrina with the bloody nose and even with as she's walking up to the door with the scratches on her back, and nobody's going to look at that and go, it's going to, like, I look at that and I kind of go, oh dear. And then but then the fact that we don't even get to see her, and then we only hear about it the second time he picks her up, Christy. And she just says, I had to go to emergency last time. I'm like, oh my, and so you can feel already like the stakes of the danger she's putting herself through when she thinks she's being real smart, grabbing the check from him when she tells him, like, my friends are telling me I should even call a lawyer. And he's just like, oh, you don't want to do that. And just starts writing a check for her, grabs it, gets the fuck out of the car and, starts to walk away, which is the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And then he plays on her need. Because that's funny about the drug addict thing, because I didn't necessarily get that in terms of like an undeniable, like, oh, well, she must be a drug addict, which I actually like. Yeah. But what I definitely get is like she's in need. Like whatever it is that's pulling her back into that car, she needs that money.
Yeah.
And whether you want to create a judgment about like what she's going to spend it on or whatever, like, is kind of immaterial, because the most important thing is she's putting herself back in the line of fire, and I'm almost proud of her when she starts gathering her things, because she knows he's distracted with Elizabeth. So this was probably the plan the whole time, to have her cake and eat it too. And unfortunately, that's not the way she ends. And then the blatant quality of just, first of all, just like the murder itself. With the chainsaw, the fact that he can chase her around a building and she can try to Jamie Lee Curtis, the doors in the hall, and nobody can answer. And he can even drop a chainsaw down several flights onto her, and nobody thinks, do I hear a chainsaw? I mean, it's New York, so I understand. There's probably a statement about like, people dying outside your apartment.
Well, I mean that we could get into the nuts and bolts of things here, of just like, did it actually happen? Because the ambiguity of the way that the movie ends. But I think that in that moment, and really like playing off of like the end of the movie too, of just like him confessing. And even like throughout the movie of just like, it's just like, well, I work in murders and executions, and nobody like actually listening to him, or just like when he says to the bartender, like, I'm going to stab you and like play with your blood, or, just like all that. Nobody's hearing him. So it's more just like a statement of just like how, all this, chaos and destruction can be going on around us. And we're just not even oblivious to it, but we just choose to ignore it. It's just, a thing with society. Like, that's unfortunate that that's typical human behavior. So, I mean, I think that, if you hear a chainsaw in a building, I think that you might someone might call the police, but I don't think anyone's going to go out into the hallway and just be like, what's that noise I heard? They're like, let whatever happens, and then we'll call the police afterwards. So I think
also the extent. Go.
That I was just gonna say, like, that was always jarring. Like when I first saw it, because I was just thinking, so it's like the building abandoned. Like what's the case here?
Right, but I mean, well, okay. You brought up something interesting that I want to get into, because for me, I never had any sense of ambiguity until this most recent screening, where I was actually like, oh, there could actually be a case to be made that this was all in his head, and that none of it happened, that the only thing that's really kind of there to be discovered is what is actually being discovered in real time while he's trying to confess. And we see, I always forget Chloe's character's name. Jean, thank you. Yeah. She's such a sweetie, but she is such a forgettable. I mean, she's She's just one of those characters who I like root for, and I don't want to see anything bad happen to her, but I can't for the life of me remember her name, and I feel like that's intentional. I don't think that's just my bad memory, because I remember other characters' names. But anyway, Jean. While she's discovering like his drawings and his doodles, like kind of endlessly flipping through this, this ledger of his, and just seeing like, the sprawled like kind of like acts of violence, some depicted in the movie, some not, some maybe, that he alludes to in his confession that we don't get to see. But, and makes you wonder like, okay, were those just like doodles, that were happening like outside of himself? This is the first time that ever entered my mind as even a remote possibility. But what do you believe as a viewer ultimately is the truth of the film?
Well, just because I hadn't seen it in so long, what I got from it is that like, who is Patrick Bateman? Like, does he even know who he is himself? Because there's this whole thing, like, like the very first scene when they're in the restaurant, they look over and they're like, oh, that's Paul Allen, and you see the back of his head, which is clearly not Jared Leto. Fuck, I can never.
Leto.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Jared. It's not Jared, and it creates this thing when we do meet Paul, and he obviously doesn't know who Patrick Bateman is. He's like referring to him as this other guy, and that's that like this joke that keeps playing on throughout the whole thing. But then we see him kill Paul, and then throughout the movie, because he's just like makes him disappear. It's just like he went to London, but people have now seen him and lunched with him in London. So it's sort of this thing is just like, I don't think anything happened. I just think that, events were happening around him and he imagined it. He just perceived like, he might have heard that Paul Allen was going away. So he then invented this scenario, and who even knows if Willem Dafoe's character is real? Like that's another thing. Like he could just be like a figment of Patrick's imagination. But then at the very end, when because he confesses to his lawyer on the voice mail, and then sees him like the next day at the restaurant, he's just like,
sure.
Oh, did you get my message? He's like, oh, that was you. That was hilarious. But he didn't think he was Patrick. He thought he was someone else. And he's like, though you were pretending to be Patrick Bateman and all this stuff. And he's like, I am Patrick Bateman. So it's like kind of goes to this joke of like nobody knows who anyone is. Like they're all interchangeable. But there's also this question of just like, is he even Patrick Bateman? Like, does Patrick Bateman exist? Maybe Patrick Bateman is like this character we never actually see in the firm that people talk about, and he just kind of like projected himself onto like Patty Bateman and just like became
little Patty Bateman.
Patty Bateman just became the persona of Patty, and that's what it had happened, because when he goes to Paul's apartment at the end to clean it of all the bodies, that's like when it's already been, it's like, you could say that that's a figment of his imagination, like the real estate agent, but she's just kind of like, get the fuck out of here. Like she like tests him. It's like, oh, you saw the ad in the New Yorker. He's like, no, yeah. And she's like, there was no ad. Like, you need to leave.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, like it was done on purpose, because it's you have to leave it up to your own interpretation of like what is real and what isn't. But I like to believe that nothing actually happened. It was more so just like, this is sort of who he could become, and maybe he does, but in the span of the movie, the events that are taking place, nothing is happening. It's almost just like this is kind of him becoming the murderer that he could become. Because I mean, like inevitably we're going to talk about the sequel, which I have not seen. Yeah, there's no need to. Which initially had no connection to American Psycho, but it wasn't until like they were making it that they're just like, oh, let's actually make this a sequel to American Psycho. And at the beginning of the movie, they write in like the first scene is that Mila Kunis's character, who's the new Psycho, she is being babysat by someone who's on a date with Patrick Bateman. He comes over and murders the babysitter, and then Mila Kunis kills Patrick Bateman. So it's almost like, okay, so now you're basically this movie undoes everything of American Psycho and just like that ambiguity of the end to just be like, oh no, Patrick Bateman is a serial killer, and a well-known one at that fact, and now she's kind of, it's the horror has been transferred into Mila Kunis's character, and she's now taken on the mantle of the American Psycho.
Oh my god!
So it's it's just weird that it's. I mean, I don't think anyone considers that to be canon, or should like that American Psycho is even not even a franchise, but like a sequel.
Right.
Like, this is like two movies.
No. It's not a proper sequel. It's an unfortunate incident, kind of like the Rage Carrie. Not a proper.
No,
sequel.
I wouldn't even say like, go that far. Like the Rage Carrie 2 is like a masterpiece in comparison to.
Oh really? It's that bad? Wow.
I remember not being able to finish it. I can't remember where I saw it. It might have been like on TV, but I got to a point where I was like, I'm bored. This is boring.
I mean, and I get bored during the Rage Carrie too, but I can finish it. I have finished it multiple times. I don't know why.
You've been talking about the Rage Carrie 2 a lot lately. You brought it up.
Have I?
Recently. I forget what. Okay. Maybe it was just conversations between us. Maybe it was on the After Dark bonus podcast, but you
check it out, folks. Let me know when I brought up the Rage
intentional
Carrie 2,
plug right there.
Yeah.
Subscribe to my Patreon to see more podcasts of us bantering.
But that's interesting, like because I of course feel differently. But I mean, I think it's just because, again, like it's whatever makes for a more compelling story for you as an audience member, which is probably why it didn't jump out at me. I think I might have seen this movie. I've probably seen it like 18 times prior to this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but not for a while. Like, I think I went a while not seeing it. I bought it on Blu-ray somewhat recently. Like, I would argue probably within the last 2 years. It was sometime during the pandemic. And I watched it when I bought it, and I'm keeping it. And then I watched it again for this. But prior to that, so that makes like, 16 or 17 times that I watched it in the first decade of the 2000s. Because I had the DVD for a while. And I don't know, I was just kind of fascinated by it, and always just kind of like asking questions. And you know, it's that kind of movie that, like, if you don't feel like having your mind fucked, or, you know, like taking an art house kind of turn, you can just kind of like sit there and enjoy it as a satire or as a comedy, a dark comedy. But for me, I feel like the message that I get most strongly from the movie is that of a kind of indifference or a turn the other head quality towards kind of like abominable behavior, just because we have so many examples of it. You've already brought up a bunch of them, but I even thought about like the line that he says to Detective Kimball when Detective Kimball's showing him Huey Lewis in the News, the CD that he got, and he says, Huey's too black sounding for me. And there's nothing that registers in Detective Kimball like as a like, oh my gosh, like what a horrible thing to say or anything like that. He's just kind of like, to each his own, closes his briefcase and leaves.
I mean, maybe more proof of him being a projection of Bateman.
Could be, but
because here's no, go ahead.
Just because for me it feels like that is just one more example of like people earnestly wanting to look the other way and just keep things running smoothly. Like, I don't want to hear about this. You're very, very wealthy. You know, the world runs in a particular kind of way. People like you don't pay for things. The system is set up in such a way that people like you can continue to succeed and even just fail upwards if need be. Because I think about like his confrontation with the woman in the apartment. It's almost like they're having a conversation subliminally that they aren't having. You know what I mean? Like, she knows who he is. Mm-hmm. She found those bodies. She knows that he came looking, and she doesn't know whether he's responsible or whether he was working with Paul Allen and everything like that. She just knows she found an apartment. It's now vacant. And it's time for her to like just paint everything white, just paint over it, blank canvas. Let's just keep this thing going and get somebody else in here.
Conspiracy organization that just like goes in there like, well, we have to sell units, rent them out,
but not even that specific. But not, but not even that specific. Like the conspiracy organization is not within that building. Yeah. It's within the city and really kind of within the country and thusly within the world. And I feel like that's what the movie is saying, is that like this system that we've built up politically and within the legal system is to benefit people who are already kind of endowed with privilege. And another reason why it's so easy to kind of like do it is not because they're special, but just because we can't tell them apart. We don't know who the hell they are. You know, we mix them up all the time. So how are we supposed to keep track of like who commits what atrocity? Like they all commit atrocities. It's just what they do. So boys will be boys kind of thing. Yeah. And because also when he talks to the lawyer, I feel like the lawyer is also just kind of like, listen, this is a whole mess I don't even want to get into because this is a case I can't win. Yeah. So I don't want to represent
I agree
you.
with you on a that right. You know, the movie is both things. You know, I know that like this is society. This is this circle. This is how they deal with things or don't deal with things, and don't want to take accountability or for him to take accountability or just even want to like be a part of it, be a witness to it. But I still think that there is a lot to be said of just like Patrick Bateman's psyche and just like what is real and what isn't. And I think in particular with the Willem Dafoe character is that Mary Harron had Willem Dafoe play the part 3 different ways. He had him play it the entire time just being like, I'm suspicious of you, I know it's you. And then another way where he's just like oblivious and it does not suspect him at all. And then another way where it's just kind of like he's putting it together, but he's not trying to make it obvious. And what they did is, after filming it all 3 ways, however many times they did, they then intercut them. So you'll see scenes where like in one moment he might be super suspicious, and the other he's just like, oh, like what you said is just like, well, to each their own sort of thing. Right. Whereas like in the more suspicious one, he might have been like, well, to each their own. Like, but just to play around with that so it doesn't really have any cohesion to it. And that's why I think that's a projection of like Patrick Bateman's own guilt and sociopathy is that he's, he doesn't know how he's perceived by other people. That it's just like, here's this person that I created in my mind who he's just jumping all over the place of just like how he views me as a person.
Okay, cool. Because what I perceived from the detective, because of the way it is shot and then thusly edited, the way Mary Harron and her editing team, her post team, the way they piece it together and everything like that is to kind of like punch things where we need them. And I feel like if there is any kind of like realistic explanation for why the detective would ever do that, it's because ultimately he knows he's not there to do a job. He's there to show up and ask questions. And I think he actually kind of enjoys putting people, even if he knows that they've done it, he enjoys kind of like sticking it to them and watching them sweat.
Well, he even says at one point, like, it's just more just like conversational. Because he's like, it's an interrogation. He's just like, no. I forget the exact line. But it's funny that you say that, like, he's not actually working, because nobody ever works in this movie. That was like an intentional thing. It's just like, Patrick gets to the office, closes the door, just puts his feet up on the desk. Like, we never see anyone do anything. Every single person there is a vice president, according to their business card. Right. And there's even it's funny that you mentioned the connection to rules of attraction, because there's a line that Evelyn says, Reese Witherspoon's character, his fiance, and she says, your father practically owns the company. And I just think, like, that's an interesting thread that's never elaborated on at all after that, because we don't know anything about his family. It's just like, for all we know, he was just like this demon spawn that materialized one day and then just started taking on the persona of Patty Bateman. And it's just like, family? What family? But apparently, like, he got there somehow, and he doesn't do any work to achieve that. So it's, that makes me think of like, who are the Batemans? Like, what is this family? If he's got this brother in this other book, and his father clearly owns this firm or is part owner of it. But there's that's just more to the ambiguity of like, who are these people, like all of them, and what exactly do they do? They just get business cards made and then compare them.
Well, because that's another thing. It's just like the anonymity. I mean, I remember the first time I saw the movie, I didn't understand. It felt so important because of the way Christian Bale delivers the line when he explains why he stays at the job to Evelyn. And she's like, well, I don't even know why you don't just quit. And he's like, because I want to fit in. Yeah. And I remember watching the movie the first time, I was like, that feels relevant. I don't know why yet. And as the movie progressed, I think I just attributed it to logic. Like, if he keeps kind of a lower profile and blends in, then he'll be less suspicious than anybody else. And if he's just kind of as a front, like kind of like, seems like, you know, even if it is through, you know, we're riding off daddy's coattails, like a businessman, a man of stature, a man who can, you know, afford to get or try to get the fanciest card in the room and everything like that.
I think
but the thing is,
well, I was going to say, I think that shows, like, I mean, Dexter is a really good example. Kind of, this movie kind of paved the way for that, but these were the shows that, like, really kind of showcased, you know, that this is a character type of just, like, the sociopath trying to fit in. And that became like a very popular for television. Like maybe it didn't work for a movie, but like, you know, Sopranos, Dexter, of just like these main characters who are just like awful people, but you care about their story. Like you want to see them succeed. You want to watch, you know, where it goes. And I think it was just maybe American Psycho is probably just ahead of its time because of that. And it was misunderstood because of that.
Yeah, even by the people who liked it, like the ones who I mentioned earlier who were criticizing it for not being enough of a satire or tonally, you know, in line with the book. But I think, especially now, like with the things that have been exposed through things like the Me Too movement and things about how corporate, you know, America really, you know, capitalism is it needs to be on the way out, because otherwise there will be just a few people at the top with much and a lot of people with nothing, you know? And the system needs to completely break down everything. And because that's becoming kind of more and more like the not the company line, but the country line, you know, of the U.S. in particular. I feel like this movie, if it were screened by audiences who had never seen it before or who haven't seen it for many years, I feel like there'd be a lot more to recognize and to appreciate, rather than, oh, it's not like what Bret East Ellis intended. And also, I don't know that that's true, because I have to read the book. I have to find out, well, is there an argument to be made about, like, you know, beyond like the humor that I recognize in the movie, is there an argument to be made about like more similarities between the two of them? I know he himself didn't criticize but spoke publicly about how this movie didn't really capture the essence of like what inspired him to write the book, and how Rules of Attraction actually tonally was more in line than anything else that he had ever written that had been adapted into another medium. So do with that what you will. But another thing that really kind of drives home the societal line for me is that, like, one of the last things that happens in the movie is Ronald Reagan on a television screen speaking about the Iran-Contra mess, as he puts it. And I just wrote down the quote: "We can accomplish more by cooperating." And it's happening just as Patrick Bateman is settling back into this cushy, bougie, you know, lifestyle that is supposed to be the American dream. And he is trapped because all he wants to do is have a catharsis. All he wants to do is get caught. All he wants to do is achieve some sense of, or some semblance of humanity, by having to pay a price for his wrongs, so maybe he can feel that he's atoning, or, you know, who knows why.
There's but even the door behind him, there's a sign that says this is not an exit, which is like intentional.
Yes. So perfect. But and so the fact that what felt like such a cathartic moment for him in that phone call to his lawyer, the message that he was leaving, it ends up being a would-be catharsis, because the world won't allow him to achieve that sense of humanity, of human consequence, and something about that, the inevitability of your own, like kind of like a cage of your own luxury, is still so compelling and not sympathetic. Like I said, I don't feel like Mary Harron's asking us to feel bad for him in any sense, but I think she's just kind of underlining the fact that even somebody who is like getting away with things and victimizing people who are in lower tax brackets than he is can feel trapped, which well, if you're not asking me to feel any sympathy about that, I can definitely agree with you. I can say,
and
yeah,
like
absolutely.
we've mentioned before, it's not a requirement to feel sympathy for our main character, whether that's the protagonist or anti-protagonist. We just have to feel empathy for them and understand that. And if that's what we get is that he's trapped, then the movie did its job. And there is a moment because he has the moment with Jean, who you always forget, in his apartment.
Chloe.
Because he just, that moment where he's just kind of like, I want you to leave. Like, if you say something bad is going to happen.
Yeah. And he's even waiting for her. I feel like he's making a case in his own head for why she deserves this and why it needs to happen.
Yeah.
Because even when he makes the joke about Ted Bundy, or not the joke, but he starts laughing at his own kind of like little factoid about Ted Bundy having a dog named Lassie. Lord knows why that's funny. Yeah. But he and then she's just kind of like, who's Ted Bundy? Yeah. And he kind of like backs off like, oh my God, you don't even know who Ted Bundy. You're too pure. You're too. But that's for whatever reason. That's
nobody
not like
knows
a
like
motive
any
to
of
destroy
the serial killers that he mentions, because he's like, he talks about Ed Gein, and he's just like, there's a great Ed Gein quote, and they're just like, who's that? Right. Like, who they mistake him for, and then he says, he's just like, on one way I want to like see a girl and take her out and treat her right.
Treat her nice.
On the other hand, I wonder what her head looks like on a stick. And then we just see him like laughing about it. Nobody else has that response.
Right.
Like, I don't even think we see like a look of disgust on them. I think it just shows his face, and like we don't see or hear a reaction. So again, it's just like more so like in his head. Like nobody's responding to him in any way whatsoever.
But also, again, why it feels like it's a society. It could be from my perspective. Because I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying you got your thing and I got mine. Yeah. The reason what I just got as you were speaking, because I recognized the moment. I recognized the awkwardness and the fact that they didn't. The men who he's sitting with didn't do anything about it or with it. They just kind of like let it lie. Mm-hmm. It's so significant that he was talking about Ed Gein in that moment, because that's what Ed Gein was like. I've read accounts and seen documentaries, and one thing that his neighbors would always say was that he was very strange, always very nice and very congenial, but had a weird sense of humor. Like when one of his victims, one of the women he actually killed, had disappeared, had gone missing, he would make jokes to people around the town that he had her back up at his house on the outskirts of town, and people would just kind of like nervously laugh and not think anything of it, because that's just Ed and his weird sense of humor, and just let it slide. And then when it finally got discovered, he really did have her at his place. The horror.
Yeah.
And so that feels really
and
significant.
Just like, and yeah, it's significant. It shows that like this is not specific to the 80s or even today. It's just been going on since the dawn of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even also, and then that whole bit is then followed by him going into the restroom to then strangle what's the character's name?
Oh shit. I'll look it up. Keep talking.
and just how it's like quite clearly, like he's got his hands around his neck, he's sweating. He has this murderous intent in his eyes, and he just sees that as just like, oh, you're coming on to me. Like, I knew this would happen. Sort of just, people like misinterpreting everything he's saying and just, turn like it. That's kind of like what's driving his murderous impulse in this movie. It's just like nobody's validating him in the way that he needs to be validated. Like he's doing all this stuff. He's got his regimen, his workout routine. And it's like, even like the opening narration, he talks about it. And there's this, I was watching some of the deleted scenes. There's even one where he was with Evelyn, because I feel like she's barely in the movies. And I'm just like, oh, another Reese Witherspoon scene. And they're like just like laying in bed watching TV, like a boring married couple, like not doing anything. She's watching some like infomercial for like this like diamond statuette or something, and not even paying attention to him at all. He's just like something like he's just like, oh, this person is like better looking, and she's just like, everyone's good looking, everyone's fit, like just like completely dismissing his insecurities
Right.
or anything, and then he tries to I guess get her to fillet him, and she's just like, I'm not in the mood to floss or whatever, just like completely turns him away. So it's just like he, like everything that he's trying to be, like he's trying so hard to fit in, and it's almost like to his detriment he's achieved that to the point where he's interchangeable from everyone else, that he is his own worst enemy. That's why, like, that's why, going back to the Defoe character, which I feel is like the antagonist of the movie, at least for Patrick, is that he's a projection of all the shit going on in his head that he can't control or figure out.
Right. But also it's interesting because I love the contradiction that's set up with Patrick, because yes, I would, it's undeniable, and the movie stresses it, his need to fit in, and one reason why in particular. But I think there's also an effort on his part to stand apart and stand out. And again, it could be logistically, like there was some, like the scene where he's sitting with his odious friends, and the narration is telling us about like the affair that Evelyn is having and the affair he's having, and we're just getting introduced to all these, duplicitous people, and they're just, and of course the other male members of his friend group are sounding off about things, with like dismissal and discompassionately, just kind of like talking about people and like what are they? He's just kind of bitching about things with absolutely no sensitivity towards other people in their heart. And then he comes up and starts sounding off like a politician about like, well, the first thing we have to do is end apartheid, and just goes on and on, like droning, like, and the people who want to lean in and who want to buy into it are leaning in and buying into it, and the people who aren't impressed at all, who are just going to go on being the way they are just going on being the way they are. But I feel like what he's doing on one hand is trying to, again, create like a facade for somebody, like, well, even if somebody one day can tell us apart, they might think, well, Patrick Bateman is an upstanding citizen. He always speaks so devoutly about like how we have to like, take care of each other and whatnot, and look out for those less fortunate than us, and blah, 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 as opposed to that asshole who's always coked up, or that asshole who's always, being a misogynist, or that asshole, he is kind of like on the surface of it, the least deplorable of the people with whom he keeps company, which I think could also be a motive to hang out with them, because he could always pin it on somebody else if he needed to. But there's also this competitive nature of him. Like, if he really just wanted to blend in, then he wouldn't have been so competitive with his cards, with the business cards when they're all placing them. He's the first one to set it down, and he wants everybody to be impressed by it. And then once they all start one by one setting them down, you can see him breaking into a sweat, getting more and more tense. And then finally, when Paul Allen's gets on display, they all know to retract their business cards, because they don't want to see it on the table next to Paul Allen's, because they won't be able to live with themselves otherwise. But he's the one who asks about it, because he must know. And there's something about that self-loathing and that competitiveness that makes him very human to me in an odd way.
There's even just like the way that scene was filmed with the sound design, because it's almost like these swords unsheathing as they open it up. So it is like a battle of all the vice presidents. It's just like, I've got the nicest card. But like, just piggybacking off of what you said, of just like this persona that he wants to create and put out there. It's sort of set up, and it's mentioned in the commentary of, we see him a few times in the movie, he, watching videos. He's always has to return videotapes. That's the thing. But because he's watching some porn movies, and he's watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the reason for this is because like he's learning how to be a person, or to put on this mask, this facade, through media. So, just in terms of like everything that he recited when they were at the club and just talking about, how to be this moralistic person, he's obviously like, he reads the paper, he watches the news, like he just absorbs all that information so then he can just put that out there and just be like, this is who I am. He doesn't know how to have sex with women, so he watches porn, and then, he gets to the scene later on and he's doing it, but he's more like concerned with like looking in the mirror and just seeing himself. And so, he just wants to like project himself into these fantasies of what he's already kind of perceived to be like normal human behavior, and then do that. So, when we see the chainsaw scene later on, it's because he was watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre and, took a little like bit of inspiration from that to then do what he had to do there.
Yeah, he is the star in every movie genre that he experiences throughout this particular movie in its runtime. And even, that's the thing, is like, even at the end when he's feeling hopeless, like you can tell, like he's still only really consumed with himself. Like he's not thinking, well, maybe I could change, like the world won't punish me for all these wrongs that I've done, so maybe I should do something. Like, that thing we always wait for the asshole character in the Groundhog Day cycle, to come up with, is like, wow, I've been an asshole, maybe I need to start being a decent person. He doesn't reach, we don't see him reach that, and I get a feeling that if there were a correct interpretation of this movie, whether it's yours or mine, I don't see him becoming an altruistic do-gooder, like, and it coming from the heart. Even though, another thing that I see, he's such an interesting character, because the more you scratch at it, or the more you kind of take things apart and observe this, particularly the way Christian Bale plays it, the way he interacts with people in these environments, or even just with the environments themselves, there's so many contradictions, and there's so many just other layers to him. Like, because here we talk about like him, putting up this front to try and like seem like a do-gooder and a model citizen in front of his deplorable friends. Yet when he is talking about music, I feel like there's something that may be the only thing he connects with, that I believe that's not just him spouting facts or trivia or trying to appeal to people, because nobody's ever listening. I feel like it's basically like what he identifies with, because he talks about conformity when he's talking about hip to be square to Paul Allen, and then when he's talking about the greatest love of all, I started thinking about the lyrics while I was preparing to record this pod, and I was just like, I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I'll live as I believed. And no matter what they take from me, they can't take away from my dignity. I think he's waiting for that. Yes.
You're just going to say it? You got to sing it.
No, I'm not singing it. I can't do it better than Whitney. Anyway. But thank you for singing, Zack. Yeah. I always appreciate that. But it's just the fact that like this song is appealing to him. I don't feel like he's just spewing out some review he read of the Whitney Houston CD or anything like that. What I feel like he's doing is looking for that moment where he can kind of like take command. Like, as much as he wants to fit in and pull back and do things secretly, there's also a part of him that wants to kind of like feel consumed by satisfaction, by self-knowledge, by a lack of desire to seek anything outside of himself, to just kind of be whole. Because one thing that I know about, and what little research I've done about like sociopaths and psychopaths, it's not that they don't feel anything. They experience feelings. They don't experience compassion. So maybe that's why he's only able to connect to an idea of a kind of self-realization, and that's what he's striving for, and that's like the one thing I don't think he'll ever really reach.
Another interesting thing about that, of just like his fondness of music and bands or artists, is that if that is like what you say, just sort of like a real passion for him, he's only really having these conversations with people that he's going to kill, or he's about to kill. So it's almost like, I want to show you like the realest sliver of who I am, but now that you've seen that, I gotta kill you. So it's
Right.
almost like him like lifting up the veil or just like peeling off the mask to like just the most like truest part of who he is. And just being like,
or the best, the best.
Yeah. But it's just like nobody can see that, so now you have to die.
And it's always followed by like the worst because, or maybe not the worst, but like it's odd. Yeah, there's this like kind of like sensitive reveal of like something that it's at his core that is pure, but then there's something at kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum, which is equally as pure him. But I just think about like that. I feel like I'm really seeing Patrick Bateman in the moments after those kills in particular, like after the Huey Lewis in the News when he kills Paul Allen, and he's just like, "You gotta get a reservation for fucking Dorsia now," you know, like whatever it is. He's consumed with rage and loathing for that person because because you exist, I can't be good enough, and I'll never feel like I am good enough, so it's your fault, which feels very human to me. But then also, it's condensed into something. Even it goes. It's like post-verbal. It's when he drops the chainsaw on poor Christy, and the last thing we see him do is you know, just looking down, covered in blood, like just going making noises, triumphant noises. And again, it feels animalistic and raw, and like something that is equally true about, you know, him, who he is at his core. And that's a lot of fun. But I don't know. I'm also affected in a big way. I think the first time I kind of get the sense, because the movie seems largely, I don't know if it's tongue-in-cheek, but like it could just be a pure satire. The first thing that happens in the movie that really kind of like gets me at my core is the first on-screen kill, in quotes, question mark, because we don't really confirm whether he's dead or not, but with Al, the homeless man, and his dog.
They're dead. I think that's
okay.
confirmed. But the one that precedes that is the woman walking on the street that when he's at the ATM and he just kind of walks up beside her.
Right.
But
there's nothing about that chills me in a sense. It's
no,
more
it doesn't.
Like,
but
this is how he does it.
But then it's followed by him, you know, at the dry cleaner.
The dry cleaner.
You got the crayon apple and the
yes.
sheets. But yeah, that one, you know, like that's probably like that. The homeless man might have been like the most sympathetic character in the entire movie. Because I agree, like that's the one that like didn't sit right the most, and then it's sort of like punctuated by stomping on the dog and killing the dog. And there's even the scene like later on when the ATM's like, feed me a stray cat, and he picks up the cat and takes out the gun. Also, where did this gun just magically materialize from? But because it's all bullshit, it's not real. But and then the lady comes up and just like, stop doing that, and he kills her. And Mary Harron on the commentary, she's like, you know, people were more upset by the prospect that he might shoot the kitten than actually of like the killing of the woman. So it's just like, I mean, that's a common trope. Not even like a trope, but like just for audiences to be more affected by the death of the animals in the movie than the actual living people. Like I remember, I think it was like Hereditary, because like remember the dog disappeared for so long, and then it's like the very end you see the dog, and I just remember like seeing that in the theater. You could hear everyone being like, "Aww."
Yep.
Who cares about everyone? It was like that's what we were wondering about was the dog.
Well, because it keys into a different level of compassion with us, because with most animals, particularly domestic animals like dogs and cats, I find people are those relationships are rooted almost solely in love and providing for them. We're like, I feel when I'm with my cat, like I take care of you. That is what I do. And it's my job to make sure you're safe. So if I see somebody violating that with even an animal that is not connected to me, I get affected. Whereas with people, there is this horrible sense as a horror fan that I have sometimes where it's just like, well, people die, you know?
I mean, like, that's why we'll never do, like, a cherry picker for, you know, an animal, a domestic pet.
No.
But, I don't even think they apply in the rules of the cherry picker. But, and dogs just, like, you know, providing unconditional love. So it's just, like, you know, things like that. It is very upsetting. And I remember watching that and like, because it is the first kill that we see, and
Right.
I already didn't feel good about how, because he didn't just like kill the homeless man, he like disrespected him, and he's just like, we don't have anyone anything in common, like you're not
horrible,
you're shit, like you smell like piss, or whatever he said. And
you
then
smell like
so
shit,
it's like to like add insult to injury, and then kill the dog. And I was just like, I don't like you. But then, Christian Bale, like, just does his thing. And by the end of the movie, I'm just like, I don't like you, but I don't like other people more than you. Like, you're somehow more interesting than everyone else here.
Because I also understand, I'm coming to see, like, from scene to scene, kind of like, I'm just coming to understand why you might kind of be the way you are, or at least there, if you're wired that way, you can't help that. But society certainly isn't doing anything to deter you. Like, you're not even when you're trying to hide it, you don't have to try that hard, and people are still seeing things, and like the blood on your sheets, and watching how violently you're shouting at this woman, and you're still suffering no consequence. And then the fact that I think it's a glimpse into how the brutality he's capable of, which I think the movie needs, and we kind of lost without. But at the same time, it's followed up by satirical moments like dragging Paul Allen's corpse in a Jean-Paul Gaultier bag and leaving a trail of blood in the lobby that goes completely unnoticed. There's even a doorman or a bellhop or a courier, a courier, what do you call him? Concierge or whatever, like sitting in like right there witnessing him drag the bag out. Then he's witnessed by Lewis and whoever the chick was. And he's a notoriously bad liar. Some of the lies.
The trail of blood even disappeared afterwards, though. Did you notice that?
Right. Yeah. and also just the fact that, and again, like I feel
it would have been great if it didn't disappear, but we saw like a janitor just like mopping it up, like as he's like.
But that's what I feel like that's the implication I got, is that like, oh, somebody just cleaned it up. That's the way it works. We're not even going to get to witness somebody else cleaning it up.
Well, there's the whole scene when he goes through into the wrong office building, and then he does shoot the concierge, and then he's going out the revolving door, but the janitor comes in, and he just like does the little 360 back and shoots them. That's when they could have had like another janitor come out and then like, well, I guess I got to clean this up.
But I also loved, because I remember I suspected, I think in the last pod, I was speculating. I was like, didn't he wear reindeer antlers at some point in this movie? And he did. Yeah. So I felt vindicated. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I didn't just imagine that. And I even love that she called him a Grinch, because I felt like the whole movie is kind of like a worst case scenario Grinch who stole Christmas, because he's this grouch who doesn't understand what makes other humans tick. So he's going to steal our potential to like live and be, like thriving human beings or whatever, because whatever given reason he comes up with, that's the Grinch stealing the ornaments and everything, like stealing Christmas. He's stealing our life, our ability, our life force, our ability to like initiate change, and or even just kind of meander, like if he feels like he's punishing us, like he's in the right. But the problem is he never gets that Grinchy moment where he hears the Who's having Christmas anyway, and it makes his heart grow 3 times that day. He's
well, he has that moment, but it's the opposite. It just like makes it like shrink back into
right,
a little, because that could be the end of just like he's done all this stuff, nobody's really affected by it at all. In fact, they're thriving in spite of it,
right?
And and he's just like, God, I can't, it's like, I can't win and I can't lose. Like, I'm just stuck.
It'd be like if the Grinch couldn't save all those toys and went back with his tail between his legs to Whoville and confessed to the Who's, it was I who stole all the toys. And they were just kind of like, what toys? And then he was just kind of like, but I hated you and I hated Christmas. And they're just like, but we're singing, come on, wear antlers. And then he has to carve the roast beast, but with all of these grinning, happy people, these shiny, happy people, these grinning, devoid of like any kind of connection, like people. And he just has to go on living Christmas. But he's the only one who knows the truth, he alone.
will and I guess Gene
shiny,
now,
happy people. That was another thing. I remember seeing an interview. I can't remember. I don't know if it was on cable or if it was an article I read, but there was some interview with Chloe Sevigny when she was talking about this character promoting this movie, and somebody alluded to the ending and said, "What do you think changes after this?" And she's like, "Oh, nothing." She probably goes on just like not wanting to say anything and not wanting to ruffle any feathers, just believing that deep down he's a really good guy. Which I thought was hilarious, because now when I watch it, I'm like, oh, that poor thing. Like, even she's doomed. Like, it's the part of the movie that you don't. I mean...
Well, I mean, all throughout, she basically makes excuses for his behavior. Because, I mean, like, right off the bat, he's so abusive towards her. Just like, don't wear that pantsuit. Yes. Wear something sexy. Come on. And wear heels.
You're prettier than that. Yeah. Oh, and wear heels. I like heels. Things that he could never get away with
and
now.
But she's, like, kind of, like... smitten, but she's like, I'm getting attention.
Oh,
like,
totally.
Someone's giving me the time of the day, and
she's like a holdover from another time, just kind of like, oh, I wish I could nab the boss, be the gal Friday who he takes home to meet his mother, and we live happily ever after. But I, at the same time, you'd think I would hate a character like that, or even think that she's stupid, but instead I'm actually really endeared by her. I don't want him to kill her when he takes her back to his apartment. And I think
it's the performance, though, because I would like
it really is.
That character, if played the wrong way or by someone that wasn't Chloe Sevigny, that it probably would have come across like not sympathetic or just frustrating. And actually, this was part of the casting, because Mary Harron was initially attached as director, and I think that she'd already had like several people cast in roles, and I believe Christian Bale was one of them. But then the studio was like, no, we're gonna go with Oliver Stone, and he was attached to direct for a while. And I think that's when like Leonardo DiCaprio was a contender.
Oh, I see.
And then it wasn't until after that they had cast all these roles with different actors, and one of the people that they had cast when Oliver Stone was doing it was Chloe's like Jean, and like Chloe as Jean. But when Mary came back, she like kind of like cleaned house and was just like, no, I'm having all these people. Right. But then like looked at Chloe and was just like, you can stay. So there was purpose to it. That she embodied what that character had to be.
Absolutely. Do you have that first line?
Do you have like a favorite like secondary character, or is it someone who's, because I mean like everyone in this movie is secondary other than Patty Bateman?
Yeah, but, totally. The movie isn't about anybody else, but I mean, she's a strong contender, but I also like, there's something about Gwen Turner's role as Elizabeth that I like a lot. Just because she seems to be kind of on different ground with him than anybody else is. It almost seems like they don't know each other that well, but there's an assumed friendship. Like, even if they hooked up, it wouldn't change things between them. They I don't know, almost like he can regard her as like kind of one of the boys, but one of the boys he can fuck. And, so I don't know, there's something about, because even the way she seems to take almost a maternal side, the way she's listening to him describe the fact that Christy is his cousin, and she's just like, or whatever. Like, she knows it's not true, but she's going to play the game.
He tells Christy that Elizabeth is the cousin.
What? Okay, I'm completely thrown.
Which character are you talking about? Because the cousin, the one who was like buying drugs, that was like called the drug dealer, right?
The one who called the drug dealer, yeah. Elizabeth.
Yeah, she was. But that was he said to Christy that she was his cousin.
Okay, I remember it differently. I think you're wrong. We've been here before. Right, Cameron was wearing a skirt in Halloween Kills the whole movie, so do with that what you will. Anyway,
I mean, maybe he would still be alive if he wasn't,
But anyway, but there's something about like her regard with him that seems like to be kind of like we're adults, whereas I feel like I don't know, the other women who he victimizes seem to play a little bit. How can I put this? Play a little bit more a traditional victim role in the scenarios that they're being depicted, if that makes any sense. So I like her. I already said I like Christy a lot. I like her observational. So no, I don't have one. I like everybody in this movie.
Okay,
I like watching everybody in this movie. Willem Dafoe, I'd watch. He can do anything, and it's fascinating. So I love watching that character too. Yeah. Why, do you have a favorite secondary character?
I'd probably say Willem Dafoe in that role, because he's so creepy and everything, but also like so endearing at the same time. And I do like Jean. I know you forget her, but I mean, like, if there's one character that I glom onto and I want to see them succeed, other than Christy, the doomed hooker. I'm just at that scene right now. I want to hear what they what they say.
Okay, but I forget Jean's name.
Well, that's just on Jean. You, like honey.
No, I still love like the way that she opens that scene when she's in the apartment. The fact she's just like, "Oh, Patrick, this is all so elegant," and it's done. She's not winking at the camera. She's not telling us how sweet and idealistic she is. She just merely is sweet and idealistic, and I adore that. And everything about even her reaction to, which should be a red flag, like the urgency with which he tells her not to put her spoon on the table and put it in the carton, and she's just kind of oh sorry, my bad, like, instead of being like, that was uncalled for, or you're scaring me, I think I'll leave, maybe I shouldn't be here.
Well, there's even the scene like when she's bringing the sparkling water for the detective, and right. He like quickly grabs the coaster before she can put it there.
She's a sunny side kind of person. Even the way she like doubles down on the line where he's just like, I'm afraid if you stay here that I'm going to hurt you, and I don't want to hurt you. Do you want to be hurt? And she's just like, no, I don't want to be bruised. It's like, again, in the hands of the wrong actress. Like, that could be so like, oh, hell, just gross. But she's so sweet, and I'm sad, but at the same time, kind of tickled. Like with the rest of this movie, I'm saddened that her fate, at least in Chloe Sevigny's eyes, is to just go on perpetuating the myth and pretending as though nothing happened. But I'm also kind of tickled by it because I'm like, well, that's who she is. She's Miss Kitty, the secretary. Executive assistant. Have you confirmed whether or not the exchange is?
It's difficult because it's hard to hear both at the same time
while we're recording the pod. Okay.
It's not of that much consequence. It's just one of those.
No, it's not.
It's just one of those little games between you and I where.
Yeah, it's not the first, second, or even third time this has ever happened. Yeah. So I still think about that Scream 2 moment and think, I really don't think Dewey was paying her a compliment. But anyway, nice.
It's the eyes. If you look at the eyes, that's where it comes in. It's not. But
why
insult.
Would she go, well, if he's paying her a compliment?
Because it was almost like he has. It's like she's impressed by his range that
I don't get impression at all, but that's me.
Oh, she's always impressed by him. She is.
Oh dear God.
She's constantly surprised by him. That's why they work as a couple.
But not in that scene.
Oh, anyway, she's all over him in that scene. She's all over.
We're talking about another movie.
I'm giving up on the cousin thing because I can't hear anything over your Gale rhetoric, but
I'm just trying to keep the ball rolling because we're recording a podcast.
I know.
I could let you look in silence.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. Okay. That would be very boring for everyone. But just hold on one moment. We're gonna.
Right.
I mean, we could cut it and then just reveal it after. But
if you really want,
we'll break up the momentum. Well, it's more fun if people look like listeners and viewers.
That should be the cherry picker. That should be the
Stop
cherry picker
trying
this
to
week.
change the cherry picker and make additional mini pickers. You always do that.
I love coming up with extra cherry pickers.
You always like to make extra work, and I'm always the one that has to do it. Because I have nothing else. I kind of like make these new fucking things. Being like, was the did Reagan or like Pazuzu like really try to kill the priest, or was it just, did he die naturally? And I'm just like, gotta make a poll. Like, no, none of that shit. Someone can just call either one of us out in the comments, whoever was wrong.
Sure, yeah, go for it, people.
That's
like, have at it. Let us know what you think, if you even care.
But you did mention Reese Witherspoon because I said like I completely forgot that she was. I mean, I remember that she was in the movie, but I just like I don't remember her being very relevant or just like, you know, even appearing all that much because she is barely in the movie. And it goes back to like when he breaks up with her, and I kind of, I don't know if it's like meant to be funny, but I always find it so funny when he says to her, like, because I forget, but every time I see the movie, I've seen it 3 times now, and he's like, you're just not terribly important to me. Like, you can do the voice better, so say it, and I'll be Reese.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to be but to be honest, you're really not that important to me.
No, he says you're not terribly important to me.
Okay. But to be honest, you're not terribly important to me. The reason I never forget that she's in this movie is because that scene actually in particular, it set a precedent for Legally Blonde because I feel like she walked in this scene so she could run in Legally Blonde, because that's when she starts squealing and going. Elle starts going like into like a high pitched, like, you know, when her boyfriend, she thinks he's proposing. And
I mean, she was already on my radar because she had done Cruel Intentions. She was in Election. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I love Election.
Apparently they're
but even prior to that, first thing I saw her in was Pleasantville. That was the first thing I saw. Yeah, there's that.
Apparently they're doing a sequel to Election.
Oh, I heard about that. I thought you were going to say to Pleasantville, and I'm like, I love.
Well, that's why you need to like hold your emphatic reactions until after I finish. And she was in that movie Fear with Mark Wahlberg. Do you remember that?
Right, which I did not see.
It was always on the TBS Superstation. Is that network even still around? But it was on like 3 times a week, and it like edited for TV. But I'd always. It would come on, you know, like Mark Wahlberg finger bangs her when they're on the Ferris wheeler while it's playing.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
It was like, was it Bush or something? I don't know, but just like she was like a big deal, like just for like younger generation. She was like, you know, like a teenage star, and I was just like, it's weird that she's in this because this is like it's such a much more like grown up movie.
I think, well, I mean, usually when people are in that kind of like transitional point between like, you know, like putting to bed like kind of like the childhood, you know, things they want to be associated with projects that are more adult. Also,
but then she went to do Legally Blonde, so I mean, it still feels like a weird detour.
Well, she was in college for that. Like she was going to grad school.
Sure, whatever. Do with that what you will.
Yeah. But no, I mean, also like to be associated with the people, with the kind of like the league of actor that was being courted for, you know, the small roles that are all over this movie. Like I know if I heard I was in something that Willem Dafoe was in, I'd be like, okay, yes, just say yes. Yeah. I don't care if I don't have any scenes with him. People are going to think I was in the same movie with Willem Dafoe. Awesome, you know? Yeah. So, yeah.
They'll think that you summer together. That's what she says. That's what I was listening to that scene because I was trying to find the cousin line, but she's just like, where do you summer?
But see, that's another thing, another level to the humiliation that is kind of, again, the word for this podcast is precedent. But the precedent that's set with the killing of Al and his dog in the beginning, it pays off later in the kill, or not even the kill, but the situation he keeps putting Christy in, because he seems intent on pairing her with people who are usually accustomed to a higher tax bracket as far as the company they keep than her, to make her uncomfortable. And if she's uncomfortable, the other woman is going to be uncomfortable. It doesn't really work with Elizabeth, but because she's already, drinking and going, "Well, Patrick," and everything like that. But Christy, who seemed halfway comfortable in the first scenario that they were in together, in the second one, she is completely tight-lipped, and I don't think she says much of anything.
Well, she said the one thing that she says, which is kind of like the trigger for him, is because they're at Paul Allen's, which is now because Paul Allen's place has just become the new murder pad, where he's taking everyone back there, and there's just bodies of kills we don't even see, of just women in the closets, and she's just like, "I liked your new place. It's much better than the other one," and it's just fuck you, I'm gonna kill you,
right?
Because there's already the jealousy over Paul Allen having the nicer place.
Well, I also love her trying to play the game. She failed both times, because even the first time when she does the line that I opened the pod with, when she's just like, how much did you pay for this apartment? And he, it's like trying to play, obviously this guy, I love the insight she almost has into him. He seems to want to impress us. It seems he's one of those blowhards who probably wants to tell us how much this costs and how much that costs. And so when she gets, again, that wonderful awkwardness, and I did hear in one of the commentaries that Mary Harron's on, I don't know if it's the most recent one, but she was talking about the awkwardness of sex worker interaction, and about how so often when it's depicted in movies prior to this one, and predominantly directed by male directors, it's almost like the sex that they're having is hot. And she's like, that's not the case. If you actually talk to people who do this for a living, it's awkward. It's an awkward social situation to be in, where someone is one person, or it can be, especially at this particular time, and especially when it's being depicted in the 80s. It's awkward to pay someone because you don't know how personal to get and how much of a guard to put up. You have to walk in line.
Especially when it's being orchestrated by Patrick Bateman.
Of course.
No, I love how he's just like, "Don't you want to know what I do?" And they're like, "No, not really."
Yeah, that's not what they're there for.
I don't know if I have much more to say about American Psycho.
No,
is there anything else you wanted to slip in there?
I'm just Mary Harron as a director. I really wanted. I'm always reminded when I see this movie, what else has she done? And I always look back and I'm always like, oh, okay, because it's a lot of TV. She's directed a lot of episodes, single episodes of a lot of really well-known shows. I'm not even going to go into it. You go on IMDb, you'll find out. She's got a really enviable filmography as a director, but I just wish as a filmmaker there was more. One thing that I know of that I still have never seen from the 90s was I Shot Andy Warhol, which was a big boon for Lily Taylor. I know that put her on the map for a lot of people who didn't really know her, or only knew her kind of through Say Anything and Mystic Pizza and her teen movies in the 80s.
I'd seen it, I just don't remember it.
Yeah, I wanna watch it again, or watch it for the first time. And the only other feature that was kind of on my radar was the Betty Page. Was it called the Betty Page Story, or the Notorious Betty Page, something like that? And which I never saw.
So maybe, do you think that American Psycho killed her career? And I say killed as in because her career is obviously not dead, but it just it prevented her from becoming so much bigger. We also have to keep. I was just gonna say, sorry. We also have to keep in mind that this is a woman director in arguably still in the year 2000, where even today, where it's just now there's groups that are really trying to push, especially when it comes to the Academy Awards. It's just why are you not honoring women directors? So I mean that could also be a factor.
Every 10 years, the AFI refreshes its top 100, I believe, list. Or that, they're like most important films, they're best films, whatever. And for the long time, it hasn't reflected any kind of real diversity, and the same titles just keep cycling through. And it's, but mostly like early and mid 20th century stuff that everybody's seen. But it's like, okay, this was all kind of like, or mostly handled by like straight white men. And it just got released because it falls on the second year of every decade, and at the end, so because it's the end of 2022, it just dropped, and apparently it's the most diverse it has ever been. Things have shot upward in the list. Things are on the list that I have never heard of, and I can't wait to see. So there's definitely hope ahead, which is nice if we're looking at the way people measure film as any kind of indicator. But it only makes me, if that is the case, if it did kill her, career as a filmmaker, then I want justice. I'm going to start a new hashtag for Mary Harron.
Well, I mean, what a film more. To like go out on too, if that's going to be your, if you're going to make an exit.
Betty Page followed this, though. I think Betty Page came out in 2005 or something like that. But I didn't see it. Nobody talks about it. I've never talked to anybody.
Yeah, it didn't have the same level of notoriety.
No, this is the one that I think of when I hear the name Mary Harron.
And when I say, even like if someone asks me like, name a horror movie that was directed by a woman, or just like what is your favorite horror movie directed by a woman? Like I can't, like I literally I'm stumped. I'm just like what that I like automatically feel like it would come to this one, because I'm just like, that's the only one that I know of.
Right. There's Mary Lambert, who did the 2 Pet Sematary movies. I like her. A lot
of Marys. If you want to be a woman director, you change your name to Mary.
Very divine. Very like divine intervention into the cinema world. At least in the US. But no, and then there's I see. And then this is where it's terrible. Where I feel like you're right. There's something to that, because I remember, of course, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I adore that movie, but I can't remember the name of the female filmmaker who was helming that one. Jennifer Kent, who did The Babadook. Love that. But yeah, it's hard. Like, you ask, what male horror directors do you love? And you can come up with 5 easy, 10 even easy. And it's like, name 10 horror female directors. It's harder. It's not fair.
Yeah.
So,
there's the one.
I need to be better.
Sorry, I'm gonna look it up real quick because I'm drawing a blank. But like Jennifer's Body. You know which one I'm talking about.
I know Diablo Cody wrote the screenplay. I don't remember who directed it.
Right. I'm Karin Kusama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And she also did the Invitation, not the one that came out this year, the one from 2015.
Cool.
So there's a name that I know.
I have the Blu-ray right here. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night was directed by Anna Lily Amirpour. Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Look her up, folks. She's worth it. They're all worth it. And so is Mary Harron. I am gonna make a concerted effort to watch I Shot Andy Warhol now, just because I've always been curious about the movie, and now that I know she directed it, there's just one more reason to put it on the list.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's cherry pick.
It's not like we kill people on purpose.
So first of all, cherry on top.
I mean,
it's kind of like by default,
Yeah, right. Like, who's in every scene in the movie? Who is like, nails?
It's almost like, because sometimes like there's no set rules. I mean, we could be considering the actor, we could be considering the character.
Yeah.
So it's it's very fluid. The inner workings of the cherryisms and all that. So We're going with good old Patty Bateman.
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Now, last week we asked you who deserves to die the most in Silent Night, Deadly Night. I nominated Killer Santa, and you nominated Mother Superior. And across
Yeah.
Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube, we have 175 votes for Killer Santa versus 439 for Mother Superior.
Ooh.
That's astounding to me.
Why?
I don't know. I literally even like in the Instagram preview, because I can put a preview on Instagram, because we had the scenes. I've just like picked like, okay, what is the worst, or depicting like the worst thing that they did, or in my mind, maybe from now on I'm gonna get you to tell me which scene to pick from your person. Like you can tell me after, just because it makes it easier to put the thing together. But I picked like the scene, like he essentially kills the parents, or he's like shooting at them, like holds them up with the car, and then like the one where she's got the whip
with
and beating him. And I just feel like it. I mean, it's not that so much that she won. It was just like, by how much? Because it's just like there's murder, and then there's like just a spanking. I mean, not just, but I just thought it was funny. It's always interesting to see where people land.
Yes. I also think it's a relative thing. I honestly think it's because the Killer Santa killed 2 adults, whereas she was beating a child. I feel like we were just talking about the animals versus people thing. I think there's a huge dividing line for people, treatment against children versus treatment against adults.
It could also be maybe a lot of people have no devout religious beliefs, and they see a figure of religion like Mother Superior, and just like, fuck that bitch. I don't like what you stand for. So I mean,
also, once you kill somebody, they're dead. But if you beat the shit out of someone, you leave them to live a fractured life to a certain extent. Like they've got a lot to work on. Let's put it that way. Okay. Thanks to you piece of shit, Mother Superior.
All right.
Okay. So, fuck. So I have to. No, not you. I have to pick somebody who deserves to die. God,
well, can we read comments of what people say?
Oh yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, go for it.
It'll hijack me. It'll help me. Steve says Mother Superior could have had her own horror franchise. Absolutely terrifying. She made Killer Santa look like Richard Attenborough from Miracle on 34th Street. Did Mother Superior return in any of the sequels?
Do you really want me to answer that? Yeah. I'll just say yes.
Okay, cool.
I'll just say yes. Not the actress, though. It's not the actress.
Okay.
And it is hilarious, the context in which she returns.
Okay. I'll have to watch at some point. Is it the second one?
Yes.
Okay. I've seen it. I just don't remember. Okay.
Okay.
Dylan Jameson says, as someone who watched this movie for the first time a couple years ago in preparation of Dead Meat's kill count, hey, stop shouting out, not us, of the franchise, I 100% wholeheartedly wanted Mother Superior to die so badly. She tortured poor Billy by forcing him into sitting on a Santa's lap, despite most likely knowing his parents were killed by a person in a Santa costume, and then punishing him for his reasonable reaction of being forced to sit on a Santa's lap with the trauma he had. Mother Superior to die.
Okay.
There's still that thread of like the Santa that killed her, but no, that's not the worst part of it. Winter Wonder 99 says Mother Superior. She made Valak from the Conjuring movies look like Pollyanna. What's with all these like?
I love the comparisons.
Yeah, there's got the Richard Attenborough Pollyanna. Rob Rangel says, I haven't seen the movie in a minute, but Mother Superior was an abusive nun from my memory, so my vote goes to her.
Okay.
Neon Icon says, my gut is going with the spree killer, but that's just me. Oh, well, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
King Blueberry says, I love how Mother Superior is worse than a murderer. I mean, at least he's insane. What's her excuse?
Ooh,
and then we have a follow-up to that. The rapey coworker should have maybe made the list.
I mean, he definitely deserved to die.
I think that the Killer Santa is worse than him.
I mean, as far as his effect on the story, even, yeah, there's an argument to be made there, sure.
I don't even remember the coworker's name. What was it?
I don't.
Yeah,
remember.
see, he's not even of consequence to.
No, he's just a shitty person. Like he's just
We just know that he doesn't drink milk. He prefers beer.
We know. Yeah, he prefers beer while on the clock, and he's the antagonist to Sweet Billy. So fuck him.
Matthias Egaman says, if Mother Superior and Father Jonas from Prom Night 4 had a love child, pure evil, but she was not a murderer in that way. Part 5 in the franchise is Pinocchio Gone Mad. Have you seen Prom Night 4?
I've seen all of them, yes.
Yeah. I've seen them too, but I just don't remember like anything.
Oh, no, I'll never forget.
I mean, you glom onto those like lesser franchises like they're going out of style.
It's also pretty recent. Like this all
happened.
happened like I think a year ago or maybe 2 years max. So it's entered my life like relatively recently. So anything else?
Elliot from Orlando says, I feel like most things ultimately can be blamed on religion, so yeah. There you go. R says, Mother Superior, with a lot of exclamations. Silent Saturn. It's yeah. Silent Saturn says, I mean, they're both awful people, but Killer Santa is actually killing and sexually assaulting people. I'm sure what we see in the film are not the only instances where he's done that. Mother Superior gets one redeeming point for telling Officer Hawkins, Officer Barnes, what a useless waste of space, good for nothing moron he is who deserves a slow, painful death. Paraphrasing. Stupidity, especially the kind that costs innocent lives, too often gets unchecked in horror films, so I give her that.
Okay.
Thomas Baker says Mother Superior is more worse as a human people. As a human people. She should have gotten her head chopped off by Billy at the end. And
I agree. I totally agree.
Jana Ford says child abusers always get my vote.
See, also there's this. When I walk away from that movie, the Killer Santa is horrible for totally. But maybe it's also just about screen time. Mother Superior, we get a lot of time to build up our hatred for her. So you walk away from that movie thinking like, who do I hate from that movie? Mother Superior! Because, because she doesn't just kind of disappear. We see her defiance in the face of her dying victim, Billy, clutching her arm, and we see the way she just denies it, just like, get off my knife, I said in the last pod. And that's exactly the energy she puts out there, only we're not on her side the way we are kind of with Chucky, so fuck her. Okay, so I have to pick here. This isn't easy. Because I feel like a lot of people are kind of equally, just horrible. I do kind of feel bad for, we didn't mention Courtney, Samantha Mathis's role, who just kind of like seems to want a life beyond this and, says basically in her last scene with Patrick, goodbye, if I don't see you before Easter, meaning I'm probably going to die later.
Do you think he killed her?
So I'm going to go with,
Do you think he killed her?
No, I don't think he killed her at all. Yeah. I think he figured she's a done deal. Like it's not even, that's not even, I don't even have to try to do that. So she may as well just get the job done herself. There's no point. Yeah. She's like a baby to Michael Myers, But okay, so I'm going to choose just because out of sheer neglect, because he's supposed to be the cavalry and he's anything but, we've agreed. I'm going to choose Donald Kimball because he's a detective. He has a job to do, and he should have been the one. He actually should have died trying to capture Patrick Bateman, but he didn't because he gave up when he had all the evidence in the world staring him in the face, and he just let him walk. So I choose the detective for that reason.
Okay.
Neglect. You're a bad
I guess
detective.
we can't apply the rule of, has to be an actual person because we
Because
don't
it's
know.
open to interpretation.
We don't know,
It's
yeah.
open to interpretation.
And I guess the same would apply to mine as well then, because I'm going to go with Jared Leto. But not Jared Leto, I mean Paul Allen. But it may as well be Jared Leto.
But Paul Allen you're choosing?
Yeah, I'll go with Paul Allen because it's Jared Leto.
You may win just on those grounds. People are going to be like, I can't, in good conscience, vote for Willem Dafoe to die.
Yeah.
So
it's
kill
not
Jared
even like
Leto.
nobody even knows what the characters' names are. It's really a battle of the actors. Is it gonna be Is it gonna be the Green Goblin or is it gonna be is it
Morbius?
Yeah, we're not giving him the Joker title. It's Morbius or the Green Goblin. Who deserves to die the most?
Actually, the Joker might be better fuel for people to want to kill him. Like, just put a picture of him in Suicide Squad and a picture of Willem Dafoe from Spider-Man.
Also interesting that there is all this like superhero connection because you've got Christian Bale's Batman. So
Yeah, right?
Batman finally did get to kill the Joker. He didn't get away.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
So
Hashtag not my Joker.
anyway, those are your choices. You can vote for I already forgot their names. Paul Allen and
Detective. I need to look at it again too. Donald Kimball.
Donald Kimball. You can vote on
Yes.
Instagram. Our Instagram is @thecherrypickerpod. Follow us there. You can vote on YouTube. The YouTube channel is The Cherry Picker. Go to the community tab. Vote there. Also subscribe to The Cherry Picker on YouTube. And you can also vote on Patreon if you do support us there. And I do want to welcome a new Patreon supporter. So say hello to JFro90.
Hi, JFro90.
Hello. So
vote your conscience, vote your heart.
Vote your conscience, vote your heart. And if you do subscribe to my Patreon, you will get all these episodes early. Released typically the Thursday or Friday before. And also once a month, we've got our bonus episode, The Cherry Picker, which we already not so subtly promoted earlier on. But this month we're doing Jawbreaker for December. And we'll have a new one for you in January. Social media individual. Where can they find you?
I have a cramp in my foot, so I can't concentrate.
Okay,
you can
I'll
find
go
me
first.
at Edward is Truth. No, it's okay. Yeah. You can find me at Edward is Truth, all one word. At
this is
Instagram and YouTube. Ow, my foot hurts.
That's
but yeah,
rich.
follow me there. How about you, Zach Cherry?
And you can find me on Instagram at retrobitchface, all one word. Follow. You can find me on YouTube, Zack Cherry, ZACK. Subscribe. Also, I forgot. I want to thank Andre Felix, our editor.
Yay!
Thank you very much. What do we got going on? Not next week because we're actually gonna take a week off. But what do we got when we come back in January?
Okay, is this the one that's not Halloween, but it's a day of the year?
Okay.
Is that the one? Is that the one? Is that the one, or is it another one?
It is
Wait,
a day.
it's the other one, isn't it?
It is a day of the year.
It's a day? Okay, it's a day. It's an unlucky day.
It's a very unlucky day.
But it's not the first one.
It's not the first one.
Okay, then we're doing Friday the 13th Part 2.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, so
I got it.
You did. So, Happy New Year to everyone. Am I allowed to say that?
Yay!
I'm sure this is before New Year.
Oh, well,
I'm not going to say it after.
We're
We're not allowed to.
Happy
We
New
can't
Year.
say it any time after the first. But have a Happy New Year. We won't see you next week, but we will be back on after the first week. For Friday the 13th Part 2.
The second week of 2023.
Exactly. There you go. Thank you for making that much easier than it did not need to be. But
That's what I do.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And we will be right back.